Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1973 comedy drama titled American Graffiti. Now, American Graffiti runs for 1 hour and 52 minutes long. It is directed by George Lucas. Yes, that's right. Once upon a time, decades ago, George Lucas was actually making movies that was not Star Wars related. I mean, sure, his debut was kind of sci-fi like, if you remember TH-1138. So, yeah, okay. He directed, yeah, but this is actually a great movie that is not Star Wars related, that was under the helm of George Lucas. It is produced by Francis Ford Coppola. The script was written by George Lucas, Gloria Katz, and Willard Hayek. The cinematography was done by Ron Evasage. I believe I may have murdered his name. If I did, I apologize. And I can't pronounce this name. Alduin? Forgive me. Not everybody has easy names. And the editing was done by Verna Fields and Maria Lucas. Alright. I don't know who did the soundtrack, but I will say one thing. If you're a fan of 50s and 60s music, this is definitely, I would strongly suggest you to get the soundtrack of American Graffiti, because the music is very eclectic. Hey, not too long ago, I was in a show called Little Shop of Horrors, and we had doo-wop themed music around that era. So if you're actually into 50s, 60s music, this might be for you. All right, the stars of the movie, and this has a pretty big star-studded lineup here. Let's see, we have Richard Dreyfuss, we have Ron Howard, we have Paul Le Mat, we had Harrison Ford before Han Solo. We also have Charles Martin Smith, we have Candy Clark, Mackenzie Phillips. Let's see, we also have Cindy Williams. Not a lot of big names here. We also have Joe Spano, Suzanne Summers, who has a cameo appearance. We have Bo Hopkins, and we also have yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. We also have the Wolfman Jack here, ready to charge up with some great classic molding goodies for you all. So if you want to sit tight, just sit back and enjoy the ride. Yeah, that's right. Wolfman Jack also makes a cameo appearance in this movie. If you can't get any more nostalgic than that, we got the Wolfman coming out of his den. Oh, yes. Sure, this movie was definitely made on a meager budget. But one thing we can all agree on is that American Graffiti definitely touched the lives of many, especially to those who are at the later stages of adolescence. After all, this is a coming-of-age story. And you really can't put a profit on that. Even though the movie is set in the 60s, early 60s, the message is definitely reflective to youth of all generations. I think this is actually a great time for me to do a review on American Graffiti, and there's a reason why. Obviously, we all know that the back-to-school season is just about in fruition. If it's not this week, it's next week. Yeah, I know, back to school, boo! Summer is almost over, boo! I think I better duck before somebody throws a tomato at my face. No tomato? Okay, maybe a rotten egg. No rotten egg? Well, yeah. Well, like I said, you know, this is definitely a coming of age story where we see teens, you know, just breaking away from their youthful stages and are now just entering another door, another chapter in their life, a chapter in their life that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Adulthood. That's right. And we not only see the changes within the characters, we also see the change of the landscape of where the setting of the movie takes place. So set in the warm, sunny skies of Modesto, California, during the last day of summer vacation in the year 1962, we follow the lives of two teenage guys who are moving up in the world as they graduate from high school, who may gain a diploma for their accomplishments, but it also comes with a catch. Hey, I guess in the quest for happiness always comes with a catch. Like they say, everything has a price to it. The golden gate to adulthood, the golden gate to comes at a sacrifice. Obviously, the transition from being a high schooler to a college student means that you're going to be stripped of your youth forever. And now you have now entered the realms of adulthood. Now, some people might say this is a reward for our hard work and effort and dedication, while others will say that this is just the beginning of the end of our lives, depending on your point of view. So you may have that diploma, you may have your accolades, your youth for now, but when it comes to the school season, your youthful ways are going to be finished. So we follow the lives of Steve Bollender, played by Ron Howard, and Kurt Henderson, played by Richard Dreyfuss, as both of them are off to go to college in Northeastern California. While Steve is really looking forward to this new journey just to get out of Modesto, Kurt, on the other hand, is very, very reluctant about the whole situation, leaving the town that he had lived throughout his whole life. And, you know, we can understand where both of them coming from. Steve wants to set out on a new adventure. I mean, I guess he's just tired of seeing the same old landmarks, going to the same old restaurants, going to the same old hangout spots. Him going off to college means a whole new atmosphere, a whole new journey for him. Meanwhile, Kurt, we can also understand his anxieties, as, you know, he is now, thanks, Mom, he is now, you know, not exactly ready to move forward in his life. He thinks that, you know, if he leaves Modesto, if he ever does come back, it's going to be a whole new atmosphere for him. Or maybe he just doesn't want to be estranged from the place he lived his whole life. And then he doesn't want to leave. And you know what? I kind of understand where he's coming from. Some people don't want to leave where they are. Some people who are just happy where they are. And you know what? That's also very easy to relate to. This is a very, very character-driven coming-of-age story. I mean, there is a lot of coming-of-age elements that come with Star Wars. Make no mistake about it. But this one here is definitely has more fleshed out characters and very, very relatable characters that we can pretty much adapt with. We know who these people are. I mean, I've met a few people in my life who sometimes feel like they just want to move forward, and then there's others that just are happy with where they are, or maybe they were meant to stay. That's their life, that's their choice, that's their prerogative, and the only thing we have to do is just accept. So during this one last night of summer vacation, Steve and Kurt decide that they want to just, gallivant, paint the town red, go and do one last journey around Modesto, California, because after tonight, there is no second chance. There is no turning back. So they drive over the strip, over to places like Mel's Drive-In, where they're greeted by two other friends. We have this kind of like greased up kind of guy named John Milner, played by Paul LaMatt. He kind of reminds me a little bit like Oren Scrivello, only except the difference is that John Milner is definitely a much more sympathetic guy. Like Oren Scrivello, John Milner is, kind of a greased up kind of guy. Sports a leather jacket, has a greased up pompadour. He's got this cool, somewhat arrogant demeanor. But of course, the difference between him and Oren is that Milner is actually a sympathetic character, whereas Oren is just practically evil to the core. And the fact of the matter is that John Milner is a drag racer, and Scrivello is just a wacky statistic dentist. So big difference there. Big difference. There's really not much of comparison except for just the way they dress. And then you have sort of almost a Seymour Krelburn type of character in this movie who goes by the name of Terry the Toad Fields, played by Charles Martin Smith. And in some ways, he kind of reminds me a little bit like Seymour, being the fact that, he's kind of a nerdy kind of guy. But the difference between him and Seymour is that, Terry's from kind of like a middle-class upbringing. And I guess you could say the guy has a little bit more of a better chances to succeed in life than Seymour. But, I kind of see a little bit of Little Shop of Horrors between John Milner and Terry the Toad. Being the fact that, Milner is like Scrivello with a greased up look, that's pretty much all you can say in comparisons and similarities. Their demeanor is a little bit different. Sure, they're both kind of cynical individuals, but one's more sympathetic than the other. Terry the Toad, like Seymour, except for the fact is that, hey, Terry has much more of a greater choices in career path, being the fact that, hey, he's an intellect. So, as they drive off, they kind of like vent about their life after high school, and that the changes in their lives will impact them for all eternity. In many ways, I also like to think this movie has a little bit of a Stand By Me type of feel to it, too. Except for instead of junior high to high, we're looking at high school students to college students. As, we still get the same reactions. The fact that, once they enter high school, or once they enter college, they probably will lose contact with each other and may probably never see each other ever again. Which kind of like what happens when you change venues of where you go to in life. It's a sad thing. The thing of difference between friends and family, I once said that family is eternal, whereas friends is only temperamental. And really, I believe it is true. I mean, a lot of people who I've known in high school, I've almost pretty much lost contact with. Even though I hate to say this, but I was never really particularly too much on friendly terms with a lot of people. But that's just the ways of life. Same with college. When you go to college, you're taking different programs, and then you end up having different separate jobs. And then it turns out that in the end, we don't really see them that often. It's not like we have a falling out, but it's just simply because we just simply don't have time because we're all occupied with our own work schedules, our own agendas, that we just don't have the time or the resources to contact with many people. And it is a sad thing. And I guess you can actually kind of feel the pressures and the angst within these characters. And it's all very relatable. So while reflecting the goals and the angst with Steve and Kurt's journey, we also focus on the struggles and the laments of the supporting characters too. So aside from the main characters, which were Steve and Kurt, which are both brilliantly played by Ron Howard and Richard Dreyfuss, we also feel the emotional strains within the supporting characters as well. In the case of our drag racing greaser named John Milner, well, he has kind of a rather dismissive take on adulthood because, like Steve and Kurt, who want to move forward in their lives, Milner just wants to continue drag racing. He doesn't really want to escape adulthood. He's having so much fun with his youth. He's having so much fun doing these drag races that he just doesn't want to move forward. But during this whole last night of summer vacation, he is met with the undaunting task of being almost like a chauffeur to an annoying teenage girl named Carol Morrison, played by Mackenzie Phillips. Yes, she is the daughter of the late John Phillips and Michelle Gilliam, who were, of course, former members of the 60s group, the Mamas and the Papas. I don't know if she was actually one of the members of the spin-off second generation group, Wilson Phillips, whose daughters were, of course, members of the Beach Boys, namely Brian Wilson, and of course Mackenzie Phillips, John and Michelle of the Mamas and the Papas. She is like, she's not like an 18, 19-year-old. She's more like almost like a pre-adolescent or maybe even a 13-year-old. Anyways, he definitely has this lustful feelings for John. But John is rather a lamented soul, and he also feels very reluctant in even being in the existence of this pre-teen. Sometimes when he tries to impress cool girls with his awesome race car, he always often tries, in a comedic touch, to like push her to the passenger seat just so that she's not seen through the rear window. He does that for a comical effect, but he often feels reluctant to be with her. Number one, because she's annoying, and number two is because she's just way too young. She's 13 and he's, about 19? He just doesn't want to be seen near her. But as I mentioned before, John is a rather lamented soul who definitely feels that the strip in Modesto is falling from grace rather quickly, and that his love for rock and roll music just hasn't been the same since Buddy Holly's death. In fact, he practically hates post-Buddy Holly music. Hell, he even hates the Beach Boys. Huh. Oh, if you think that the Beach Boys are plaguing the radio station, stick around another 2 more years when a bunch of mop-top Brits are going to be soon taking the airwaves. Oh, wouldn't that be a wonderful experience, you know? Oh yeah, definitely for sure. Yeah, we'll just stick around for another 2 more years. No, do we have to wait that long? Yes, I think we should. You know, you hate the Beach Boys. In a couple of years' time, the British is going to be taking over. But all joking aside, he definitely has no intentions to stop drag racing and picking up hot girls. But that's his choice, you know. It's his decision to make, you know. I mean, some people just don't want to let go, and he kind of epitomizes that. He'll even go further to challenge a much older drag racer by the name of Bob Falfa, played by a pre-Han Solo Harrison Ford, for a race which turns out quite unflattering. Carol, meanwhile, tries to interact and get adjusted to the lives of these reckless youths. You know, particularly the reason she's pining over John Milner is because, you know, it's all the sort of that stereotypical, all the girls love to date the bad boy, or all the bad boys get the hot girls. You know, it's kind of like something that's just a reality in life. Maybe not all the time, but a lot of times you see that. You would have the smart intellectual nerd, and then you would have the bad boy in the hot car. Who are the girls are going to go for? The bad boy in the hot car. Perhaps even to the point of questioning herself in being with John might not be the right path to take, even though she still has the feelings for him. Even though he just wants to just take her on his little journey and then just drive her home and forget this day ever happened. And he'll just continue to lament about how his city is decaying and how music is dying and how life itself just keeps getting more and more suckier by the minute. Writer-director George Lucas definitely uses the balancing of the relations of John and Carol along with Steve and Kurt to demonstrate the real educational lessons of entering adulthood. And that if they can't handle the pressures of adulthood, they will just eventually remain as kids. So rounding off the characters in this character-driven movie, we have a mystery bombshell who doesn't have a name, but she seems to often drive off in a 1956 T-Bird played by Suzanne Summers, in which Kurt is pining over, just like Steve has the attraction to Kurt's sister Lori, played by Cindy Williams. While T-Bird Girl is luring Kurt into a more adventurous journey, Lori is trying to keep Steve grounded. And they kind of suggest that they go out and meet other people while Steve has gone away from college. Now, Lori is still pretty much a year away from graduating, but they also have the fear that they'll probably end up losing contact with one another, which seems to often happen quite frequently in relationships too. So when they return to their school, They recalled the memories they had as they said goodbye to each other one more time. Kurt, on the other hand, finds it difficult to let his past go, but definitely does get some reassurance from a teacher who encourages him not to let this opportunity to leave town slip by. If there's one character that I really get the most invested in, would have to be the character of Terry the Toad Fields, played by Charles Martin Smith. Terry is almost like the epitome of who I was. He was a socially awkward individual. He was actively gifted, academically gifted, but was also a target towards everyone. So one day, Steve actually gives him permission to watch over his car, which definitely is like an open door, maybe to some extent an open invitation to Terry's chance of showing that just because I wear glasses and just because I get straight A's doesn't mean I'm not cool. So he decides to drive around the strip, and he has several misadventures involving his car. And he also leads up to the age-old question, who says that brainy kids don't get the girls? Oh, he gets the girl, all right. The girl comes in the form of a rebellious one who goes by the name of Debbie Dunham, played by Candy Clark. And they go off onto several misadventures too. And she also sort of goes by the epitome, like, just because I'm the bad girl in town doesn't necessarily mean that I'm evil or that I am wicked. I just have a little bit of an edge I just have a little bit of an edge. Nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's what she kind of represents. You know, like one of those, don't just read the cover of the book. You have to read through the whole pages. And I think that's kind of like what Debbie Dunham represents. And she's also, once again, played by truly great effect. And sure, this was a coming-of-age story. There's plenty of dimension to the characters. And it definitely helped launch the careers of plenty of the then unknowns into superstars in the film industry. That's absolutely true. Many of these unknowns at the time went on to have their careers skyrocketed. I mean, Richard Dreyfuss, 2 years' time, would be Oscar nominated in a movie called Jaws. And, you know, he also was definitely a fan favorite with Steven Spielberg, not only with Jaws, but then 2 years' time, 2 years later, he would be in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, you know, Richard Dreyfuss's career took off really after this. Ron Howard, well, he was already a veteran actor, even though he was in his early 20s when this movie came out. You know, of course, you know, he was O.B. Taylor from the Andy Griffith Show. So, but here we actually get to see this is definitely him, you know, like before he was cast as Richie Cunningham on the TV series Happy Days. Let's see, Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford, like I said, after American Graffiti, his career didn't only just skyrocketed, but just went outside the galaxy, as he would definitely play a role totally out of this world in Han Solo, in Star Wars, and Indiana Jones and the Indiana Jones franchises. So his career really took it to a new level. Of course, Charles Martin Smith went on to a great career as a director. So did Ron Howard. Let's see, we also had Cindy Williams, just like Ron Howard. She would start off on Happy Days and then would spin off to another Gary Marshall project known as Laverne and Shirley, along with Penny Marshall. And of course, aside from them, there was also, Lenny and Squiggy and the rest of the other gang. Yeah. Let's see, we also had some great cameo appearances from the Wolfman himself, Wolfman Jack. So if you have Wolfman Jack on your list, you're going to hear some great classic songs from the 50s to the early 60s. And even as a little bit of a joke, the final song in this movie is the 1964 song, All Summer Long by the Beach Boys. Now, a lot of people are thinking that could be a bit of an anachronism because the setting of this movie was in 1962. And yet All Summer Long by the Beach Boys was released in 1964. But the reason why they did that was so that, this was going to be the beginning, the dawning of a new generation of music, a new generation for music lovers, and just a new atmosphere overall. All right, they say we also have Suzanne Summers, long before her career took off on the TV series like Three's Company with John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt and Norman Fell. Yeah. So, we have quite a few group of unknowns, but they really, really made this movie possible for them to launch off to bigger and better things. And even though its setting was in the early 1960s, you don't have to be born in that era to understand the life struggles that pertains to these characters. Even as we speak in 2019, escaping from youthfulness to adulthood is as painful and scary as they come. Though the rewards are plentiful, if you work hard and take the pains and the trials and the tribulations as they come, then you start to realize adulthood is actually pretty cool. Of course, you might probably get more freedom, but you also have a lot more strain to go with you in your own personal lives. Nobody ever told me it was easy. Nobody ever said it was easy. But if you work hard and you persevere, then everything will be all right. Once again, I gotta say, this is truly, truly an amazing movie. I highly recommend people to see this movie. It's got some good nostalgia, it's got some good comedy, it's got some good drama. I'm not going to necessarily say that the movie has a happy ending because the fate of many of the characters are not so pleasant. I guess maybe that's just another symbol of that's life itself. Life isn't always pleasant. I know that from experience. But at the same time, I was hopefully gonna try and hope that things worked out for the characters. Unfortunately, not all of them. I mean, John Milner, they said, died in a car crash during a drag race in 1964. Terry the Toad is missing in action and hasn't been seen since 1965. So the whereabouts of where he is unknown. Then you have Steve decided to stay in Modesto and work as an insurance salesman. And Kurt, well, he went off to Canada to become a writer. So I really, really do think that this movie probably was a lot of an inspiration for a lot of these movies that have coming of age things, especially Rob Reiner's 1986 movie Stand By Me, which was, of course, inspired by a short story by Stephen King. It's got some coming of age stories, and it has an epilogue, and not all of the epilogue has good things that came within the characters after the events that had transpired in this movie. But that's life itself. Not everybody has a happy ending in their lives. Even though I have always wished the best of people, sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes people's lives are not all sugar-coated. And, for that, I'm sorry to those who did not have a good life after high school. But at the same time, to those who have persevered, who have prospered throughout, I wish them the best of luck. And those who still need to have that second chance, I wish them the best of luck as well. So overall, if I was to give a scale out of 10, I would definitely give American Graffiti a 9. It's a great, great movie, a very cherished classic. And I guess that's really, really, it really holds a special place in my heart. Is that even though it was set in the 60s and had all the 60s stuff, it can be still as a reflection to people in today's society. The points of view and the perspectives from the characters have not aged. Even though a lot of things have changed, the points of view of the characters are still universal, even generations later. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric, Correct Writer, saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.